All right, all right. Done. Well done. Well done. Well done. Well done. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Growth School. It's another amazing, awesome, great time on Growth School again today. And we're looking at something very, very, very essential, something very key for as many who are willing to take their message all across the world. They want more ears to listen to them. They want to capture more eyeballs to their messages. You don't just want to be like a candle that is put under a bushel. You want to be that light that is set on an hill that all eyes will see, and you can really make so much impact. So today we are considering something very important, and we are looking at that thing that has to do with podcasting. So if you are someone who is who know you have a knowledge that people can benefit from, you have something of impact, something of value that can transform lives, and you have just been reaching out to small group of people who just hear you, and a lot of times they are like, okay, who is speaking? Or you are regimented and restricted to the people who can listen to your message. But now you want to take it to the point where those, not just in your nation, not just in your continent, but those in other continents of the world can also listen to your message. I think you have to consider podcasting. If I was talking about podcasting like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe it would be with a lot of difficulties, a lot of technicalities, a lot of you getting this gadget, getting that expert to come and do this for you. But now it has been made to be very, very easy that you can even begin from the comfort of your home. I started my podcast, Growth Secret with Abiodun Mustafa, last year, 2020, after I spoke with facilitator, a guest that will be taking us through today. And it has been really, really amazing. If you go right now to Google Podcast or Apple Podcast, or you go to Spotify and you just put my name Abiodun Mustafa right now, you will see my name come out. Why? Just through the secret of podcasting. Now, before our guest comes on, if you can really hear me and you know you're ready for this you are ready for this session of Good Screw tonight, can I just see you drop a comment? So I will be sure that we are ready. Just drop a comment and type ready, 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 ready. So I will be sure that you are, yeah, profitable podcasting. So today we'll be looking at how to start. We want to consider how to start and grow a profitable podcast. Though a lot of people are talking about podcasts, you may go right now on YouTube, but who is actually telling you how to start that one that is profitable? So, who is really teaching you how to start a podcast that is profitable? That's the one that not just your family members are listening to, but that which those who don't know you, those who are not your race, those who don't know your background will begin to listen to you. You know, yesterday I was checking my analytics and I could tell you that I have about 40 something percent of people listening to my podcast from USA. I have a couple of other people. This USA, I have the top guests from Nigeria, USA. I have Germany, South Africa, Ireland, Belgium, Benin, that should be Benin Republic, Uganda, and the UK. So that's the analytics for my podcast, which means if I could do this, you can also make that happen. You can let your message go across the world. And today, there are a lot of people who prefer listening to a podcast, people who just want to do things, they want to listen, they don't have all the time to sit down and begin to watch that video, read a bulk of those books. They just want to listen. They want to be doing things and they want to listen to that podcast. So I would advise that you really think and consider a podcast at this time. So I want to talk about three major things. I will talk about the idea quickly, talk about the identity, and talk about the influence. All right. When it comes to podcasting, you must come with a critical idea. What idea are you wanting to sell? Are you wanting to talk about? What idea are you wanting to push out? What ideologies are you wanting to portray? Podcasting does not just come with, yes, I've started a podcast, I want people to listen, and you start sharing a lot of those links on your status on Facebook, and you want people to listen. It starts with, what is the idea? That's what that passion that drives you. What's that thing that you see as a problem that you really want to solve? What's that thing that you want people to always capture when they listen to your podcast? So what results do you want people to have when they listen to your podcast? So when you're starting a podcast, number one, you need to consider the idea. It's not all of the paparazzi. It's not always about, oh, I'm sitting down now, someone is listening to me, or you do all of that. No, what's the idea? You need to sit down and consider what idea is driving me to start this podcast. Number two is the identity. You should understand that a podcast is a voice that represents a person. A podcast is a voice that represents a person. For example, when you talk about Larry King's show, it talks about a person. When you listen to Oprah Winfrey's podcast, it's talking about a person. When you listen to Brendan Burchard, it's talking about a person. So you should know that when you are choosing to start a podcast, beyond the idea, you must choose an identity. For example, I said growth secrets. Why? Because I want, when people think about personal growth, they should always think of Abiodun Mustafa. When people think about ideas that challenge them to move from a ground zero to take an 120%, they should think about me. Why? Because it relates, it represents growth. It represents growth. So you should think about identity. Even though Dayo Moyo will be talking very soon about how you can determine your podcast name, how you can determine how to run through the process, the apps to start with the process, and then how you can always schedule your various podcast session and make a lot of impact with them. You should consider, number one, what idea are you wanting to talk about? Number two, what's the identity? And number three, what influence do you want to create? What influence do you want to create? I talk about influence because your podcast is transcending out of your heart to the heart of someone else. And as you begin to speak through that podcast, you are not talking to yourself. No matter how fantastic your idea is, you're willing to influence someone else. So you are passing out a message to another heart, and not just to one, not just two, not just three, to hundreds and thousands and millions of people. And you are not speaking just to Africans. If you are an African, you are speaking to Europeans, you are speaking to North Americans, you are speaking to South Americans, you are speaking to Australians, you are speaking to Europeans. So you must understand that a podcast is not just about making the name, it's not just about doing something, it's not just about the grammatical structure, it's not just about the lexis and structure, but it's also about, number one, what idea, number two, what identity, and number three, what influence. Got that? All right, today is not my session, so it's basically just to start out. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be bringing on stage on Growth School tonight an international, amazing podcaster who podcast and speak about education and African story. He has been a dear friend for over I think it's over 10 years now, where it would remind me. Over 10 years now, we have been friends. We served together in the amazing state of Zamfara, the huge empire of Gusau, Zamfara state. And today we are still friends. I've had the ability to be a guest on his podcast. The future is now, or no, this is the future. That's the name of his podcast. I've had the ability to hold two sessions on his podcast session. And also, I have invited him to one of my podcast sessions on growth secret with Abiodun Mustafa, where we talked about demystifying between education and academics. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the phenomenal, exceptional, amazing, eloquent, who have transitioned from not just being a phlegmatic to an impactful melancholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Growth School, Dayo Moyo. Dayo Moyo, welcome to Growth School. It's nice and amazing to have
Yeah,
you here.
good evening. Right, it's great to be here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing so great. Yeah, Dayo Moyo, you have been doing podcasting for a while. In fact, you were one of those people who spurred me into starting a podcast, and I can see a lot of the results. And right now, there is someone who is watching us who is actually waiting that, oh, I want to start a podcast. I want to know. People have said it's difficult. I need to get an expensive mic. I need to get an expensive gadget. I remember you also did that, but now you are not using all of those gadgets. I want to do all of this. Please, how can someone really start a podcast? How can they grow a podcast if they are running a podcast now and they don't just want to run a podcast, they really want to start a profitable podcast? Please teach us from your experience and let us learn from you. Over to you, Dayo Moyo.
Right, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate. I think like the way I would like to start this session is to make everybody that's listening to us this evening understand that this is actually the best time to start a podcast. So the best time was probably a year ago. The next best time is today. And the reason for it is not far-fetched. Platforms, not just Nigerian platform, international platform are beginning to see podcasts as something very important. If you are looking at the content landscape, audio is the battleground now. So from Spotify, YouTube have a podcast tab now on the platform. Facebook is pursuing podcast. And so we know the Clubhouse, the success with Clubhouse. Audio is the big thing or is the future. So it makes sense to start kind of investing in it from now because the way I see podcasting is where we are today is where YouTube was in 2006, in which people that got on that platform from Vimeo to YouTube very early, they were able to build a following and then they were able to cash out in a few years from then, from 2006. And that's the place we are currently for podcasting. And even coming back home in Nigeria, just last week, MTN unveiled their podcasting platform that makes monetizing podcasting even a whole lot easier. So MTN is, I think, the name of the of the of the platform is Audible. Yeah, if I get that right, Audible. So it's like another a platform where MTN is trying to make um, content creators, specifically podcasters, give them the ability to monetize their podcast. So a whole lot is happening in the podcast space that this is the right time to begin to invest in it consistently and to be able to build a following on podcast. And I guess the next thing I'd like to say before we dive into how, the question of how, is why should you start a podcast? And for me, the way I look at it is even though you do not want to do podcasting as a career, there are so many reasons why you should start a podcast. Number one is that it helps you understand how to communicate. So communication is a great skill, and podcasting, the act of podcasting, helps you really understand how to communicate. Number two is that probably you don't even want to do podcasting as a career, but it helps you to put your thoughts out there. The same way a blog gives you a kind of platform where your thoughts is on the internet or what you are doing is on the internet. And so when you are looking for a job in 2 years' time, you can point to the blog as something that you've done or something your prospective employer needs to look at and understand your passion, understand what you've been doing. That's the same thing for podcasting. So someone could look at your podcast or listen to your podcast and understand your thought process, understand what your passion is, and that can give you an edge. That can give you an edge over the other 1,000 applicants. The other thing is that you might not want to do podcasting as a career, but you own a small business. And podcasting gives you a platform to be able to advertise, to be able to push a product. Um, there's this big thing that is happening that they call the creators economy, which um, pundits are kind of predicting that it's going to be the big thing. So if you go on YouTube and you kind of um, study YouTube content creator from PewDiePie to Mr. Beast to Arian to you name them, these people are able to shut out products because they are content creators. So from mesh to apps to physical product like coffee, because they were able to build an audience over time. So you have people having 3.5 million YouTube subscriber, or even the new wave TikTok having 10 million subscriber on TikTok. When you are able to build an audience like this, you will be able to monetize it either through selling of physical product or selling of course, or even by using tools like Patreon, where people kind of support you by donating or saying behind the scenes of your podcast of your show, as the case may be. So in essence, content creation is the next big thing, or content creation is key, and audio, that is podcasting, is I think the next big thing. And so it just makes sense for you to plug into it right now. I also think like it could also be a good way for you to generate passive income. So I spent the first part of this discussion talking about the why I think like podcasting is a good thing for you to do, even though you don't want to be a career content creator or you don't want to be a career podcaster. Podcasting is a great thing. I think the last thing I need to mention also, it gives you the opportunity to meet people and network. So for example, I've been in the last couple of months, I've been able to meet people from over 12, 13 countries, network with people from over 15 countries. Why? Because I started a series on my podcast, Let's Talk Africa. And so to be able to pull up that project, I needed to speak. Okay, so the goal is to speak with someone from every African country. And I only knew someone from 2 African countries, Ghana and Sierra Leone. Now, for the Ghana, the way I knew someone from Ghana is also by podcasting. I interviewed him on my podcast, and that was how I was able to build a network from Ghana. And so I've spoken to someone from Malawi, I've spoken to someone from Botswana, I've spoken to someone from Algeria, I've spoken to someone from Madagascar, spoken to someone from Kenya, from Ghana. And all this is because of podcasting. I've met very interesting people who are doing interesting things, and I'm able to use the podcast as a leverage to kind of network with these people. And so, for example, if I want to network with CEOs, all I need to do is probably start an interview series interviewing CEOs. I might not know any CEO for now, but I could always shoot them an email or shoot them a Twitter message and tell them this is what I'm doing, sell my idea, and then bring them on board. And that can be an avenue or an opening to network with those people. So that in just in brief or in summary, those are some of the reasons why I think you should start a podcast. And if you're interested in starting a podcast, you should start it now. And the truth is that things are now easy. Abiodun has talked about, if we were talking about podcasting, say 3 years ago, 4, 5 years ago, you probably need to be very good technical, but it's not the case again. Now you can actually so you can actually start a podcast today if you want to. All right. So I think the next thing I need to deal with now the how do you start a podcast. So we've dealt with the why should you start a podcast, and I would like to deal with how can you start the podcast. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is that you can start your podcast. So let me start like this. Some misconception. So sometimes we think like we need big gadgets. You need to have a studio. You need to have like a recording microphone. You need to have an amp. You need to have a laptop. And if you don't have these things, you cannot start a podcast. But that's not true. In fact, just with your phone, you can start recording a podcast, start publishing it, and start promoting it, even from tonight. And so, how do you start a podcast? So, there is an app that is kind of very important to be able to use to record your podcast, and it's called Anchor. Anchor, Anchor. And you can just go on Google Play Store and download it. And then after downloading it, it's very easy to set up. I think I need to mention here that the good part again is that Anchor has just been acquired by Spotify, and Spotify is a big player in the audio space. So it's like the it's like there's so much traction in this space already. So all you need to do is to download Anchor app from Play Store. It's very easy to set up, and as soon as you set up Anchor app, you can just immediately start recording. And how you just record is you see in the middle, you see the plus sign. And as soon as you click the plus sign, it begins to record automatically. You can record multiple times. You can delete, you can save, you can listen to yourself again. And if you're okay with what you hear, you can always publish immediately. And as soon as you publish your podcast or your audio or your episode, the episode of your podcast can be listened to from any part of the world, every part of the world, basically. So you're not constrained to Nigeria, you're not constrained to West Africa, you're not constrained to Africa. You're actually you have the ability to broadcast to every part of the world. So someone from the United States can listen to you, someone from Cuba, someone from anywhere in the world, basically, can listen to you. So that's the part of recording. It's very easy. And then as you grow, you would now see reason to kind of invest in better gears. But that will be as you grow. I think not until I think early this year, I started podcasting, I think in 2018. And not until early this year, I was recording with my phone. But now I just got no, I'm just using a mic now because I'm doing more of interviews. If you look, you can see the mic. So this is like my setup. I have a mic, I have an amp, and then this is a laptop. And so I just started using this just this year or late last year. So it just tells you that you can record with your phone, and it's going to be good. The audio is going to be great, and then you can always push it out as the case may be. So that's recording. Recording is very, very easy, like very easy. As soon as you set up the Anchor app, you would be able to record immediately. And if you have any issues, you could always reach out to Abiodun. It would put you through. So that's the part of recording. So after recording, you need to promote. And because if you do not promote, people would not be able to discover your podcast. And if they do not discover your podcast, you would not have listens. And if you do not have listens, then what's the point? I usually say, if no one is listening to my podcast, then it's just like a diary. And if I want to keep a diary, I will just keep a diary. But if I want to do a podcast, then I need to put in the work so that people can listen to it. So there are a number of ways you can harness so that people can, to increase your chances of people listening to your podcast. One of the most organic ways to be on multiple platforms. So the way I would like to explain it is that Anchor is like a recording software in which you can always record your podcast, and then they help you to host your podcast too, or episode of your podcast. So it's like a bucket where you can always keep your audio. They help you record and they help you host it. But there are other what we call distribution platform in which Anchor helps you send your podcast episode too, or you can always do by yourself. So think of it like you have your podcast episode on Anchor, but someone can listen to it on Apple, for example. Someone can listen to it on Google Podcasts. Someone can listen to it on Spotify. Someone can listen to it on iHeart. There are so many um, distribution platform. So one way you can increase listens on your podcast is to have it on multiple distribution platform. So you have your podcast on Google Podcast, you have your podcast on Spotify, you have your podcast on Apple Podcast, you have your podcast on iHeart, you have it on Radio Public, as many as possible. So some of these platform, Anchor will send your podcast to automatically, but for some others, you have to um, put in for it by yourself, sometimes manually, and it's a one-off process. So as soon as you do it, you can connect your podcast to it so that every week or as you publish whatsoever timeline you choose for yourself, probably weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, automatically someone can listen to it on this distribution platform. Then the second thing is by broadcasting on social media. So depending on how much time you have, you might want to have a dedicated social media handle for your podcast. But if you do not have enough time to man two podcast and two social media handles, then you can just use your own handle for the meantime. So push to your friends, place on your WhatsApp status, place on your Facebook page, place on Twitter, place on Instagram. I think I know a podcaster that also places on TikTok. So basically, just place it on these social media handles of yours and have your friend listen to it. Then the other thing you can do again is to use graphics. So when you publish your episodes and then you are promoting it, you can just write the title of the episode and then put the link. But we've discovered that graphics, I have personally discovered that anytime I create a graphic design for my podcast episode, more people listen to it because it's captivating. So you can always design something. If you are savvy, you can use CorelDRAW, Photoshop, or you can just use Canvas. Canva is an easy way where you can just design something. You have templates and the rest, or you could just get a friend to help you design something and then use it for promotion. So that's the second way you can promote your podcast. The third way you can promote your podcast is what we call audiogram. So audiogram it's like creating a video but in audio form. So you people don't see your face, but it's like a video format. So the thing is that, for example, you cannot post an audio content on Facebook. Facebook is getting is trying to enter the podcast space, but it's still early stage. But as it is today, you cannot post like audio clips on Facebook. You cannot post audio clip on Twitter and many social media handle. So audiogram converts your audio to video, even though it's still audio, but it's going to be in MP4 format, and then you can have a graphic design which people will just see, and then they will just be seeing audio wave and just hear your voice basically. So you can cut snippets of your podcast and you can distribute it on social media. So remember, we have it on as many distribution platform as possible. um, Promote on social media. Then now you can use um, graphics that you design maybe on Canva. Then the next one is audiogram. Now the fifth is that join podcasting groups or groups of interest. For example, if I'm into education, I'm podcasting about education, I go on Facebook and join groups that are education oriented, so that when I publish episode, I can place them on these groups. So you can join groups that are under your niche. The other way is that you can join podcasting groups. And by joining podcasting group, you don't just have the ability to promote your podcast. You are like in a community of people that can help you get guests, help you learn things, give you tips, help you understand what is going on in the podcasting industry and all. And a good podcasting community that I'm a part of is called Niger Pod Up and Pod Magic Creators. It's like Nigerians, or we are Nigerians in the podcasting industry. And on the WhatsApp group, the WhatsApp group is currently full to show you the how enormous this is. So there are like 275 people already on the WhatsApp group. But we do have a Telegram group. We do have a Facebook page, and we usually have weekly clubhouse session where you can learn, where you can collaborate, get guests. And then on Twitter, every twice a week, actually, you have the opportunity to post the link to your podcast episode for the week, and then people could discover your podcast by that. So you join podcasting groups and community. That's one way also to grow. And then lastly, I guess this would be for people who have been in podcasting for a while. One way also to kind of grow your podcast is by being a guest on other people's podcasts. So by being a guest on other people's podcasts, it kind of increases your visibility as a podcaster. Or you can also collaborate with other podcasters. So for example, you can talk about one topic and then you share audio. And this is a way to collaborate and then to what we call cross promote, um, and it helps you gain visibility. So these are some of the ways that can help you um, promote your podcast basically. And I think the last thing I would like to talk on is that you need to be consistent. So one way you can build traction is by being consistent. So for example, if you say you want to publish a podcast episode every week, you need to just stick to it and abide by it. If you cannot publish weekly, then probably you want to publish 2 times a month. You just need to stick to it. The more consistent you are, the more likely that you are able to build an audience, because your audience see you as committed to the cause, and then they will keep coming back to it. And don't just be afraid to start small. You are going to figure things out. For example, when I started podcasting, I started by doing talking about education basically. So I talk about what I believe education should be and what I think the education sector can learn from business sectors, something like that. And then I discovered that that's like too small a niche, because podcasting is just coming up in Nigeria, and probably many school owners would not be listening to podcasts because they don't know what podcast is. And so I decided to tweak my podcast, and then I pivoted to talking to students, young people, because during the lockdown, I had access to many young people. So that went on until the lockdown was eased. And so these young students that I had access to no longer have access to their phones. And so I started talking about African history, since historical events in Africa, so from dictators to um, just things that had happened in Africa historically. And then that was going on very fine. I was enjoying it. And then I decided to like, oh, why not interview an African or someone from Africa on this podcast and just do something. And so I interviewed one person, I interviewed two people, I interviewed three people. I'm like, wow, this makes sense, because interviewing people, I have access. That's something that interviewing gives me. And I really enjoyed interviewing, and I was able to talk to interesting people, and people loved the interview. And so I was coming from, I was coming from, sorry.
I hope you're getting so much value from this already. I think Emmanuel Luchechi says, wow, quite interesting to commence. Thank you. All right. I hope a lot of you are already starting out your podcasts. Sorry, Moyo, I think the network kicked you out.
I mistakenly closed the chat. I'm sorry.
Wow. All right. Ucheki says, okay. Ucheki says, it's great to know that it works automatically. All right. So it's not just about watching. You can begin to take action steps and determine things that you need to do. All right. I would leave it up to Moyo to come up and continue from where he stopped. Yeah, go on, Moyo.
Right. So I was talking about how I've pivoted. So even though you don't have it figured out yet, just start something. You are going to figure it as you go on, and then you will discover that place that works for you, and you are more comfortable with, and that people would love you for. So, like I said, and as Abiodun has said, this is the best time to start. Monetization is going to get better, and then we are going to figure out ways to monetize. I'm looking forward to what Facebook does with podcasting, how people would be able to have podcasting notification in as a notification on their Facebook pages. That would change the landscape. And it's my belief that those people that enter into the foray early would reap big, especially considering the fact that content creation is just beginning to pick up in Africa. So many people are beginning to see podcasts as a viable means to share content. And I think like we have so many podcast platforms in the United States of America, like it's a big play. And Africa also is beginning to warm up to that opportunity. Podcasting groups and podcasting events are beginning to come up. And so it only follows that before you know it, brand money will begin to get to be pushed into the space because more people will begin to listen. And as more people begin to listen, then we can leverage something because when you have that number, then you can harness that number to be able to play to brand, and brand will begin to push money into the space. But don't forget, it's not just the money; it's also the fact that it gives you visibility. So, for example, like Abiodun is known for growth. Even though he does not receive money from his podcast, he can leverage that. He can connect with someone that would put him in front of 5,000 people in an event, someone who would listen to him and give him an opportunity. He can connect with people who would buy his books, and he can connect with people who would attend his events. So basically, even though it's not gaining money directly from his podcast gives him visibility. I'm going to give you a good example because YouTube is like the, if I would put it that way, podcast 2.0, because YouTube is um like in a more matured place. And like someone that I follow on YouTube is someone called Peace Itimi. Peace Itimi is like she's like a marketer, digital marketer, but she has a YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel has like, I think, probably 10,000 plus subscribers. And the way I know Peace Itimi, and I'm guessing the way so many people know Peace Itimi amidst the thousands of digital marketers in Nigeria, is because she had a YouTube page. And what does she do on her YouTube channel? She was talking about digital marketing. That is her space. That's what she was working on, or that is where she's working. And that's the industry she's working, permits me. And so that was what she was talking about. And that was how I knew her. And so if I had a digital marketing work, I feel like I'm more comfortable to give her the job because I've listened to her, I've seen her, I kind of have a sense of what she can do and how she can deliver. But the good part, remember what I told you about pivoting. The good part is that this year, Peace Itimi started talking to CEOs of tech company. And so she has brought like big CEOs. For example, she brought the CEO of Patricia. She brought the CEO of, or the former CEO of Flutterwave, Inya Boyeji. She has brought the CEO of Eden. Now, what this does is that it gives Peace Itimi access to the chief executive officer, it builds her network. She's able to even push her product to these people because these are the people that make decisions in the tech space. And that is because she has a YouTube channel. I don't know if if she has even monetized the channel or if it's like a very major source of income for her. But more than the income, it has given her access and also visibility. And this is what what podcast can do also. It can give you access and it can give you visibility. So you can say, oh, my name is Dayo Moyo. I'm the host of This is the Future. I'm doing this and this. I've interviewed so and so. I've interviewed someone from 20 African countries. I've spoken about African story. Now you see, it can help you open doors. And that is what and that's how I want you to see the opportunity. And basically, and I think like if you are currently in the university, you have nothing to lose. Start a podcast, create content. I believe that content creation is one thing that everyone should be doing, and podcasting is just one format of content creation because it just gives you access, it gives you helps you, it gives you a platform you can leverage to do whatsoever. So now that you are still in school and you don't have like so much responsibility, my advice is go into content creation, try it, see if it's something you want to build a career on. And even though you don't want to build a career on it, you can use it as a launch pad for another career path you want to pursue in life. So this is what I have for you. Remember, like I said at the beginning, the best time to start podcasting was probably last year. The next best time is now. So start podcasting. If you have any issues, make sure you connect with Abiodun and myself. We'll be more than able to well able to put you through in these things.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. That was so much masterclass in a very short time. Like I remembered when we had that training with those um, information, yeah, I content, I creation, yes, information creation student when we had that master class. I remembered how we had to really do a lot of learnings, going through all of the process, showing people how to do it one after the other. And I can tell you, is so simple that you can't imagine it's as simple as that. I've been on my bed and I recorded a podcast and people listened. I was on my bed, I
Yeah.
recorded a podcast and sent, and people listened. Um, is only if I tell you, is only if I tell you, you know that. But it was amazing. And one good thing about Anchor is you don't need to go and manufacture background sounds to infuse into it. It has everything. Like you can just do the raw speaking, do it very nicely, understand the psychology around it, and then you infuse the background sound, and it comes out very interesting. Comes out very interesting. You can go ahead to Google Podcast, search out Dayo Moyo. Just go to Google Podcast or Apple Podcast. You can search out Dayo Moyo, listen to his sessions. You can also search out Abiodun Mustafa there, listen to my session. It's an amazing one. So I do not know, are there questions for Dayo Moyo? Are there questions for Dayo Moyo? If you have questions for Dayo Moyo, can you just type them in the comment section? Somebody is saying thank you. All right, thank you, Chechi. Um, thank you, David Samuel. All right, if you have questions, can you just drop them quickly? Drop them quickly. All right. Dayo Moyo, what is certain? Let me just try to ask these few questions. What are certain challenges you think people have with running a podcast consistently, like having to get content back to back to back to back? How I know that's a challenge, and I really want to ask, how can one overcome such? Because I think my at the time was I would just come up, do one, like I my what I did was I wrote down topics, so I would just come on, talk about them at a while. But I had a flow of intro and extra that I made use of. I just put the content in between. And then when I want to publish, I just make it publish. So when someone starts a podcast, like a lot of people, their issue would be creating content consistently. How do you think one can stay consistent with creating valuable content? Okay, so that the podcast does not become watered down, because now you are not just speaking to your family members. It's no longer fellowship meeting. It's not house care fellowship. Mm-mm. You are talking to a broad audience. So how can one stay consistent with quality and valuable content?
So I would say that number one, you need to be passionate about what you're discussing. Like you really need to know it and be passionate about it. And that's the way you wouldn't dry out. And then some people also just do like a vlog, YouTube vlog. You just talk about yourself. Like there's this friend of mine, podcast title is My Name is Toby. So she just talk about herself. She can't run out of content. And so you need to talk about something that you are passionate about. Then there's another friend, podcasting friend, that does a series with what's her name? A series with Shewa. So she talks about films or series, definitely, basically. So as long as she continues to watch series, she will continue to have content. She will continue to review it. So number one, something you are passionate about. Number two, you don't want to choose a very small niche. You want to choose something that you can always talk about. Then number three is that first of all, start with yourself. Like you accept you know someone that both of you are always in the same venue, because network is still an issue. So you want to either you are the sole host, or the person you are hosting with, you could always have access to the person, because sometimes this is always an issue with consistency, or this is one of the causes of inconsistency, because you are not always in the same physical venue as your co-host. So you want to always, as much as possible, be the sole host, or have someone that you can always be in the same physical space with the person. Then number three is that you want to start small. Don't start with an interview or an interview podcast, because getting guests is really hard. It's harder than you may think. So you may want, like for example, I only started getting guests for my podcast after just this year, or yes, this year. So all through it has just been only me. So I've been able to build a kind of a network or a system that I can get guests easily. So for example, I currently have like 20 interviews in my archive that I've not even pushed. So basically I went on a break like in June. I just resumed the first week of August, and I already have content that will last me till December, because I publish twice a week. So I already have like 20 something, probably 25, almost 30 um podcast episode already. And this is because I already have a network of friends that I can maybe easily get guests than when if I started getting guests when I just started out. So those are some of the ways you can be consistent. I think the last thing I would like to mention that has worked for me, I don't run out of topics, because one thing also I do is that I try to work by series. So what I mean by series is that at the time I was doing the dictator series, African dictator series. So with the African dictator series, I know that I have to go through Nigeria, probably talk about Abacha. Then I can go to Uganda, I'll talk about Museveni, and then I can go to Libya and talk about and talk about, I've forgotten his name. Then I can go to Zimbabwe and talk about Mugabe. So you can see, because I'm going with a series, at least I have a content for like probably 2 months. Then after that, I did the African Nobel Laureate series. Now, the Africans that have won Nobel laureates, there are many, probably 30 or so. So it means that if I stuck to that series, I have content for like 30 days. So series is one way also you can always build content. Now I'm doing a series, Let's Talk Africa, where I intend to speak with someone from every African country. And if I'm able to pull that off, it means that I have content for 64 days and 64 weeks because I'm pushing one of the interviews per week. So if I'm able to speak with someone from every African country, I have content for 64 weeks. That's like 1.5 years. 1.5 years. So these are some of the things you need to think about so that you remain consistent to putting out episode either weekly, bi-weekly, or as you may choose.
Awesome, amazing answer. Yeah, I have a question here by Emmanuel Uchechi. Emmanuel Uchechi is asking, do you have to edit the raw recordings?
All
Maybe I
right.
have
So
to
when you
answer.
are starting
All
out,
right,
okay.
go on.
So when you are starting
Go on.
out, if you are a solo, yeah, when you are starting out, if you are a solo host, you may not need to edit because with editing, you have to have a software on your laptop and so on. You may not need to edit. So all you need to do is what I did is I usually write a script. So I write a script, and then if I make a mistake, because editing on Anchor is not as sophisticated as it should be. So because my podcast episode are usually, let's say, maximum of 30 minutes. So if I make a mistake, I can always redo it. But writing a script helps you not to make a mistake. So you don't need to give excuse that you don't have an editing skill or you don't have a laptop. You can podcast without editing. The only time I started editing was when I started interviews. And the reason why I needed to edit my interviews is because sometimes your guest would say things that are not probably in line with what is the topic is. Maybe they spend too long answering a question. Maybe there's there's like there's like a background noise that you need to just clean. And that is why you need to edit when you are interviewing. But aside that, you could always record without editing. And one way you can do that is, for example, when I record on Saturday nights because I know that there are no VGs on Saturday nights. Friday nights, there are usually VGs, and then they could affect your recording. But I record Saturday in the midnight, and it's like relatively silent. There is no noise, no on or vehicle that would get and interfere with my audio, and so I do not need to edit.
All right, amazing. Great, great. And so you can choose best time when there will be a lot of silence. I remembered when we had the interview for Purpose, I think Purpose Discovery, the one we had for educators and children. It was like a midnight. Any other thing that would choose the best time because you sleep any noise from those my neighbors, those around my apartment. There was no party going on. Maybe you stay in Lagos where there is so much of all these. Maybe weekends when you don't go to work, you want to record your podcast, and that's when all the people that do what do they call that thing? Oh, and bed
Oh,
in
wow.
the night, and they're now making you can't admit time podcasting. Okay, another question, Dayo Moyo. I think you did justice to that question. Another question here is how can one stay consistent with valuable content? All right, I think we answered that already. This is also what do you think about being open and vulnerable publicly? I think this is a very important question. Thank you, Uchechi, for that question. Like people who want to begin to speak out of their past experiences, past situation, and a lot of times they are feeling like, am I not being too open? Am I not being vulnerable? And maybe I should allow you to speak before I share my. I think I could probably share something about it, but just try to answer it.
All right, this is interesting. And the way I would like to answer this question is I had an interview with a girl named Toby. Her podcast is My Name is Toby. Now, what she does on that podcast is that she talks about herself. And she in fact says that her podcast is an open diary. And then I asked her this question: do you not um usually think about being, or how vulnerable are you? What's the limit here? What don't you talk about in public? Because she talks about basically everything. And then she says something. She said, whatsoever I share on my podcast, I'm already comfortable with sharing it on the podcast. I don't share everything, only those things that I'm comfortable with sharing on the podcast. So you are the one that determine how vulnerable you want to be and how open you want to be with your podcast. But I would like to note here is that it's not all podcast type, if we may put it that way, or genre, that you need to be vulnerable and talk about yourself. For example, I interview people, I interview other people and talk about other people. If you talk about education, you can just stick with education and not talk about your own personal experience. If you talk about, you can talk about series, or you can do a review of books and you talk about books and never talk about yourself or your experience. So there's so many way you can do podcasting without even talking about, and they won't even know your name because you could use an alias. So they won't know your personal story if you are not comfortable with sharing. But if you are even comfortable with sharing your story, you still choose the stories you want to share with your audience and the ones you want to keep.
That answers Uchiji's questions. And even sometimes there's a way you can go about it. There's a way you can share your personal story like a fiction. Like you can just come out and say, there's this lady called Shade, and you just say not the real name though. Even though you're talking about yourself, nobody really knows you're talking about yourself. But you are speaking out of your heart from an experience that is yours, but you did not say, you won't say he was molested by his auntie. You just say there's a guy called Femi. Femi at the age of 4 grew up in. So it's not like you were coming up to tell them, this happened to me, this didn't happen to me, that didn't happen to me. Even though you have overcome it, you are convenient with it. There are also certain instructions to go about it depending on your kind of person. Okay. And I think this is also a very good question. How can I? Someone is asking, please. All right. So Moyo, someone is asking, please, what are the possible ways to generate content?
All right, can I answer it? What did you say?
Yeah. What are possible ways to generate content?
All right, so there are so many ways you can generate content depending on what you're talking about on your podcast. One way you can generate content, if you're talking about a topic, for example, if I'm talking about education, if I'm a teacher, I just talk about what transpires whilst teaching people or what transpire. So I'm talking about my own experiences. That's one way to generate content. If you are talking about news or things that happen, like viral news on social media, then you need to be active on social media to be able to generate content. Then one way also you can generate content is also by reading. So by reading books that are in your niche, you can come up with ideas that you want to talk about. And then another way is by watching. So you can either watch YouTube under your niche, see what people are talking about, and then use it as a way to get topics for your own podcast. And then listen to other podcasts. By listening to other podcasts, you might not be doing the exact thing, and because I do not even recommend that, but by listening to people also you can get idea on what to talk about. Then the last way you can also generate content is by speaking to people. So when you speak to people, you can also use that as a way to generate content. And then sometimes it's just pure brainstorming. So you can just sit down and just wish the content come. It can be like when I'm walking on the street. For example, when I'm walking on the street, I could be thinking about what's the content I need to give tomorrow. So like I'm having a YouTube session tomorrow. I need to create content. Today, as I was walking on the street, I was thinking about it. What do I talk about? How do I talk about it? What will I be saying? That sort of thing. So actively brainstorming about the kind of content that makes sense for my podcast is something too you need to do from time to time to be able to generate content. But I guess if you are passionate about what you're talking about and you're knowledgeable about it, it makes your work easier than it would normally be, because content will come more easily to you than it would have. I can't imagine talking about pets, for example. I'm going to think and think for content because I don't like pets and I'm not into the pet business. So if you're talking about something you are passionate about, content generation become easier than it would have been.
Awesome. That's a very, very great one. All right, all right, all right, all right. Thank you, Dayo Moyo. Thank you so much for that insight. I can see the reactions going, then the comment. Well noted. Thank you. Elvis, wow, how are you? Well done. Right, amazing, amazing. So Moyo, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello, Moyo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just wanted to ask, what's your perspective about choosing a podcast name?
Right.
Like a lot of people want to start now. What's your view about how to choose a good podcast name? Did you get that?
Yes, I did.
So how can one choose a podcast name? Like definitely myself, Growth Secret with Abiodun Mustafa. I chose that because I was talking about personal growth all around career growth in terms of helping people grow their minds so that they can make exceptional contribution to the world around them. Because I believe every growth you want to make on the outward begins from the internal. Okay, so that's the perspective. So for someone else, like you chose I want to talk about I want to talk about career podcasts. I want to talk about money podcasts. I want to talk about inspirational podcasts. I want to talk about religious podcasts. So, what's your counsel? What would you suggest about what people should consider when they are choosing a podcast name?
All right, so I wrote an article about this. If you just go to Niger Pod Up, you are going to see an article. But I'm going to summarize what my ideas are as regards choosing a podcast name. The first thing you need to understand is that whilst choosing a name, that name is a brand. You need to see it as a brand, not just a name. And so you are building a brand even from the name of your podcast. So the first thing I would encourage is that you choose a very broad name. Don't choose a name that is very niche. For example, this is the future is broad, very broad. So that when I was doing education, think about it. If I've said my podcast name is Education with Dayo Moyo, it then means that when I pivoted to interviews, I have to change it. When I pivoted to stories, African stories, I have to change it again. But because I chose a broad name or a name that can accommodate different things, when I pivoted, it wasn't a problem because you can start with something 2 years down the line. You may want to add some other segment to your podcast. And if you've already put yourself in a box, it becomes an issue. Now, the other thing you want to consider whilst naming your podcast is that you want to choose word that is easy to spell. So don't give your podcast a name that you have to always spell it before people know how to spell it. So it must be easy to spell, it must be easy to pronounce, and it must be simple, so memorable. So people should be able to remember it. Um, so those are some of the things. Then again, you don't want to use swear words because when you use swear words, you can be flagged by distribution companies. So for example, Apple Podcasts might not want to place you on their platform. So you want to use words that is simple and that there is no swear. So there's no like you don't use the F word, you don't use those type of things. It's just as simple, easy to spell. Now, there are different types of name. There's the name we call the descriptive name. So you are like describing what your podcast is. Then you can use your name or incorporate your name. Time out with Oluwapelumi. My name is Toby. You are just incorporating your name. So it means that you are building the brand of your podcast around yourself. So that is one way you can do your podcast. Then we have the descriptive name. Then we have the creative name. So the creative name is a name in which you are not you are not using you are just being creative. For example, let me think about sheet tables. You it's a creative name. It gives you an idea of what the podcast is, but it's not descriptive. It's like just creative. I think there's one pot of soup. It's creative. So you could have a creative name and then build a brand out of it. But basically, you want to choose a name that is easy to spell, easy to pronounce. It's memorable and it does not contain swear words. I think if you want a more in-depth um, idea around this, then you can just check up ninjapodup.com. I have an article there about what you need to consider when choosing a name for a podcast. It's like Abiodun is having issues with his network. Let's just wait a bit. Hopefully he fixes it and it comes by.
Much. Moyo, see you on the back end.
All right.
Thank you everyone for joining Growth School tonight. I hope you learned so much from the subject on profitable podcasting. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for joining. Please let's do well to make it again in our next session of Growth School. So please ensure that you're on our Telegram channel. And to him after now. And then get about the process on Anchor and possibly guide you towards installing. Thank you so much. Please do well to subscribe to this YouTube channel, like and also share with as many as that our next session on Growth School, possibly